chosen one. It is time to embrace the fact that your intelligence and gifts leave people shook as they realize you are truly one of a kind, possessing a level of insight that most are simply unequipped to handle. Long ago, you absorbed the rule to dim your light after seeing patterns and logical cracks that everyone else missed, but that cold withdrawal from others was never a reflection of your worth. It was a reaction to your depth. You are no longer required to apologize for the clarity of your mind or the weight of your spirit, because the very thing you were taught to hide is the exact gift that makes you an incomparable force in this reality. Before the gifts, before the friction, before the confusion of being wired differently in a world that rewards sameness, there was a system, Varashawait, a carefully built, extensively tested, expertly maintained system. And this system had one primary function that never made it into any official description. Its job was to produce minds that could be managed. Think about how education worked, not the subjects, but the structure itself. Approved information was delivered to you. Memorizing that information accurately was rewarded. Accepting the conclusions you were handed without modification was called intelligence. Questioning those conclusions was corrected. The entire architecture, the grades, the approval, the social belonging was engineered to produce one behavior. You were supposed to receive, repeat, and comply. Wadardin, one bequate. Specific narratives about power, possibility and potential were delivered so continuously that they stopped sounding like narratives and started sounding like facts. Culture layered on top of that. Family expectations layered on top of culture. Social belonging became conditional on staying within the approved edges of thought. This is the world you were born into. It was a real, engineered, socially reinforced structure designed to keep minds predictable and productive in ways that served the structure rather than the individual living inside it. And the first thing you need to understand about yourself, the thread that pulls everything else open, is that this structure never fully worked on you. It was not because you decided to resist it or because you chose at some point to be different. It was because something in you was fundamentally incompatible with the design. The conditioning kept sliding off. No matter how many times the world tried to load its standard programming onto your mind kept rejecting it. What got called a problem was actually proof. It was proof that your mind arrived with its own architecture, its own orientation toward truth that was not available for purchase, override, or replacement. But reason for what? The structure was never broken. It worked exactly as designed. What you were simply never supposed to fit inside it. The gifts did not arrive wrapped in clarity. They did not come with language that honored them or a community of people who recognized them. They arrived as friction, as social cost, as the specific loneliness that comes from receiving a signal that no one around you seems to be picking up. The first gift was pattern recognition, the ability to read what is actually happening beneath the surface of what is being said and performed. You could walk into a situation and sense the tension that everyone else was pretending did not exist. You could listen to an explanation and feel, without being able to articulate why, that something important was missing from it. You could watch a situation develop and see the direction it was heading before the people inside it had any awareness of the trajectory they were on. Nobody framed that as a gift. The framing that got handed to you instead was this: stop reading into things, give people the benefit of the doubt, and stop being so suspicious.
Well, the second gift was the inability to be fooled for long.
Your mind runs an automatic, involuntary accuracy check at the speed of every interaction. When a tone does not match the content of the words being spoken, your mind flags it. When a sequence of events contradicts the claim being made right now, your mind flags it. When behavior across time is inconsistent with the version of events currently being offered, your mind flags all of it, immediately and without effort. That gift got called paranoia. It got called negativity. It got called a wound from your past that was distorting your perception of the present. The third gift was vision, the way your mind reaches forward and backward naturally, reading patterns that repeat across time and projecting consequences that most minds simply cannot see because most minds are only looking at what is directly in front of them. You could feel where a decision was heading. You could sense the long shape of what was coming with a clarity that functioned less like prediction and more like recognition. That gift got called overthinking. It got called borrowing trouble. It got called living too far inside your own head. If you felt called by this message, hype this video so other chosen ones like you can be reached. What if Kambabuana your tum? Notice the pattern running across all three. Every gift, every legitimate, functional, powerful capacity of your extraordinary mind was renamed as a dysfunction. Not because the gifts were not real, but because real gifts operating at full capacity expose things that certain structures depend on staying hidden. They catch deceptions that certain dynamics depend on going uncaught. They see consequences that certain investments depend on remaining invisible. So take a moment to notice who was doing the renaming. Notice whose comfort depended on convincing you that your clearest sight was your greatest flaw. It followed a precise pattern, and naming that pattern accurately is not about bitterness. It is about finally understanding what was actually happening in every encounter that left you feeling misread, minimized, or attacked simply for being what you are. The first category is the fully conditioned. These are not malicious people. These are people who accepted the structure completely, who built their entire sense of self inside the approved framework, and who eventually came to experience that compliance as intelligence itself. When your mind refused the framework they had built their identity around, you did something unforgivable entirely by accident. The wage you made the framework visible. Structures remain invisible only as long as everyone agrees to pretend they are not there. The moment one person in any given dynamic refuses that pretense, the structure becomes impossible to ignore. And when a structure becomes visible to people who built their entire lives inside it, those people face a question they simply cannot afford to answer honestly. Was everything I accepted just a script I was handed? So the reflex was to come after you, not with that question because that was too costly, but with the available tools instead. Too much, arrogant, difficult. Who told you that you were something special? That response was never an honest assessment of you. It was the structure defending itself through the people who had the most invested in it. What all took Lorth. The second category is the performers. These are people who spent considerable energy constructing a persona, performing depth, performing intelligence, performing originality. In environments full of other performances, the act worked seamlessly because no authentic standard was present for comparison. Then you showed up, not performing anything, simply present, operating from actual depth rather than its simulation. The performance felt the contrast before the conscious mind even processed it, because that recognition happens at a level beneath strategy. An imitation always knows what it is when it stands beside the original. And the feeling that recognition produces in the person doing the imitating has a name. It is humiliation. Humiliated people do not reach for gratitude. Their reflex is to eliminate the source of the contrast, so criticisms materialized that could not quite land cleanly. The claim that you were trying too hard to be different is a remarkable accusation to make against someone who is simply being what they are. The suggestion that your depth was performance, your confidence was arrogance, your realness was a calculated act, none of that was an accurate description of you. All of it was a defense mechanism, protecting something that felt threatened by your presence. I must interrupt this transmission for just a moment. Are you really chosen? Prove it. What already and real chosen ones are also paying attention. You've noticed it. Chosen one channels getting silenced, videos pulled, voices removed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice, and neither should you. That's why joining Destiny Engine is a 360 win. You support your favorite channels and fuel your own rise at the same time. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve divine justice. The Lordward, your duty is you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and watch your enemies choke on the rope their own lies created. Palladian, if you're done consuming and ready to prove you're chosen, start your Destiny engine for $7 today, join the Obsidian Inner Order live checks, and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. But. The third category is the one that cost the most because it came from the closest range. These are the resigned, the people who carried the same gifts you carry, who felt what you feel, who had the same fire, and who, through enough rejection and enough social consequence, made the decision to put the fire down. They chose to fit. They made themselves manageable because the price of being unmanageable felt too high. Your presence did not just make those people uncomfortable, it haunted them because you were proof that the fire could be kept. That the decision to put it down was a decision, not an inevitability, not the only path forward, but a deliberate choice. And every moment you refused to make that same choice was a moment the weight of their own choice got heavier. That is the category that sometimes presents itself as love and resentment existing at the same time, and it is genuinely both. But you cannot solve someone else's grief by agreeing to grieve the same thing they do. That work belongs to them, not to you. What own burnt? Your gifts did not begin with you. Hold that, really hold it, because it changes the weight of everything you carry. There were people before you, in your lineage, in the generations that built toward the moment you arrived, who carried exactly what you carry. The same pattern recognition, the same inability to be fooled, the same creative fire. And many of those people lived in circumstances where those gifts were not merely inconvenient. They lived where seeing clearly was punished, where refusing to be programmed carried consequences far beyond social discomfort, and where the fire had to be hidden and covered, not because it was not real, but because the environment surrounding it was not yet safe for it. Those people did not take their gifts with them when they left. Gifts do not work that way. They compress. They fold down into cellular memory, and they wait, patient as seeds in winter ground, waiting for someone in the lineage strong enough to carry them without hiding, waiting for the moment when what was preserved could finally surface and do what it was always meant to do. You are that moment, Winkrelite. This is why your intelligence sometimes feels like it comes from somewhere beyond your personal experience. This is why you sometimes know things without being able to trace the knowing back to anything you were ever taught. That is not imagination. That is not arrogance. That is memory encoded at a level deeper than conscious recall, wisdom preserved through generations of pressure, specifically so that you could access it now. When people cannot explain why you know what you know, when your insight arrives without the approved credentials or the institutional backing they expect, it disturbs their framework. Their framework insists that knowledge must be issued by systems they recognize. And you carry knowledge that no system issued. It came through a different channel entirely. What expelling?
One fikiri ganks, the ronic to run backaby, truthfully in for base. How do you watch your individual experience?
If you accept the world's redefinition of your gifts as flaws, if you make yourself smaller to fit inside structures built to manage minds like yours, you are not just limiting yourself, you are breaking the chain. Everything that survived through generations of pressure to reach you intact ends with you, not eventually, now. The people who came before you paid too much for that to be an acceptable outcome. This is not personal. This is ancestral. The stakes are not about your comfort. They are about your continuation of something that was never meant to stop with you. You have spent long enough defending what you carry. You have spent long enough measuring your gifts against the comfort level of people who were never the intended audience for them. That ends here. Your mind cannot be programmed. In a world built entirely on the engineering of predictable, manageable minds, a sovereign intelligence, one that questions, investigates, and refuses to accept handed conclusions until they earn the right to be believed, is among the rarest things that exist. Every significant shift in human experience began with a mind that would not accept the current consensus. Your refusal was never the dysfunction. Your refusal was the function. Your refusal was the function. Your pattern recognition is not paranoia. It is the most sophisticated form of protection available to a human mind. It sees the contradiction before the contradiction finishes constructing itself. It reads the trajectory of a situation before the situation arrives. It senses the agenda beneath the performance before the performance reaches its conclusion. This is discernment operating at full capacity. This is a mind that cannot be deceived for long, and that capacity is worth more than almost any other asset you could develop in a lifetime. There is a real active channel between your consciousness and a frequency that most people have been conditioned out of hearing. Ideas arrive in you that feel larger than your personal experience. They arrive complete, carrying a certainty that is nothing like the tentative quality of manufactured thinking. Your role is not to question whether you deserve to receive what arrives. Your role is to translate it faithfully, to bring it through clearly enough that it lands in the world with everything it carried in transit still intact. Plodding. What it ward gifted remindem chaldi or wetsign. Dondig your vision that extends beyond immediate outcomes is not impracticality, it is temporal intelligence. It is the ability to read patterns at a scale that most minds do not even attempt, to see where trajectories lead before they complete themselves, and to build things that will serve people and purposes that extend well beyond what is currently visible. This is not dreaming. This is the most practical orientation imaginable for someone who is building something that is meant to last. And your awareness of where intelligence itself reaches its limit, the understanding that logic is an instrument and not a universe, that there are entire dimensions of truth that pure analysis will never reach, that awareness makes your understanding complete in a way that purely analytical approaches never achieve. You do not just know things. You know what to do with what you know, in the moments when knowing alone is not enough. These are not silver linings, these are fully operational capacities functioning exactly as they were designed to function. And here is what makes them genuinely threatening to every structure built on compliance. A fully activated version of you is ungovernable, not chaotic, but ungovernable. Your mind cannot be reliably predicted, managed, or redirected. And minds that cannot be managed do not maintain comfortable fictions. They move toward truth, and they bring what surrounds them along. That is what has always been at stake, not your personality, your full activation. The opposition was never about your flaws. It was always about your potential. Let that settle completely before moving forward. Every moment of being pushed back, every social penalty, every attempt to make you smaller or quieter or more manageable, none of that was a reaction to your weakness. All of it was a reaction to your strength. Specifically, it was a reaction to the strength that had not yet been fully claimed, the fully activated, fully expressed version of what you carry. That is what the opposition could sense coming. Not you in a diminished form, struggling and second-guessing. The version that was still emerging, still being reached toward through every refusal to comply, every question that cracked the script open, every moment the fire refused to go out, no matter how much pressure was applied. Think about what you represent when you are fully expressed. You are a mind that cannot be programmed, moving through a world that was built on programming. You are a pattern reader, moving through a world that depends on its patterns going unread. You are ancestral wisdom made current in a world that profits from people being cut off from their lineage. You are authenticity moving through a world that runs almost entirely on performance. You are not different in some peripheral way. You are the opposite of what the structure requires people to be in order to stay manageable. The people who pushed back hardest, whose opposition seemed most disproportionate to anything you were actually doing, understood something about you that you did not yet fully understand about yourself at the time. Watto, they saw the size of what was coming. Even a fraction of your full expression was enough to dissolve performances, expose frameworks, and remind people of the distance between what they were living and what they could be living. Imagine what the full version does. That is what was always feared, not you diminished. You fully arrived. The conflict in your life has been carrying a false verdict for far too long. Here is the accurate one. You were never the problem, not as comfort, but as forensic fact. What are the planet? The world attempted to program you, and every single attempt failed. Not because you were broken, because your architecture was fundamentally incompatible with the programming. That is not dysfunction, that is design, a design that arrived with you before any of the conditioning ever did. The gifts that were renamed as flaws, the pattern recognition called paranoia, the authenticity called arrogance, the vision called impractical, the depth called too much, every single one of them is a real, functional, powerful capacity. Every single one of them serves you, and everyone who genuinely receives you when it is expressed rather than suppressed. The opposition, the conditioned protecting their framework, the performers protecting their act, the resigned protecting themselves from the reflection of their own abandoned fire. None of that was a response to your actual reality. All of it was a response to what your reality triggered in the people around you. That responsibility belongs to them. It was never yours to carry. Watto's an of the eye, the Kamar, with a lineage, the generations of compressed brilliance that survived everything to reach you. That is not a burden. That is momentum. You are not dragging the past as a heavy thing. You are continuing a current that has been building force for far longer than your individual timeline can account for. So what does this verdict mean going forward? It means the gifts stop being treated as things to manage, apologize for, and ration carefully so as not to disturb people whose peace depends on your diminishment. It means your full expression stops being measured against the comfort level of people who were never built to receive it. It means you stop waiting for the world to create a space large enough to contain you without friction. There is no such space, and there was never supposed to be. The friction was never evidence of misfit. The friction was evidence of force. Partuhism piety horse to be sully. Pies put attention to the timing of all this, because it is not coincidental. Intelligence is being outsourced at a scale that has no historical precedent. The capacity for independent thought, the ability to hold a complex idea without external scaffolding, to generate an original perception without algorithmic prompting, to navigate genuine uncertainty with nothing but a trained and trusted mind, is atrophying in real time. This is not happening because people lack the capacity. It is happening because the environment stopped demanding the exercise. Every time thinking can be replaced with a tool, the tool gets used. And every time the tool does the thinking, the muscle of original thought becomes slightly less capable than it was before. Rencordi one du you. And that world, the one you are actually living in right now, what you carry is not just unusual. It is increasingly rare and increasingly critical. Your mind was never fully programmable. The creative channel that runs through you connects to a source that no algorithm can access. Your vision stretches across timelines that no recommendation engine was designed to consider. These are not abstract advantages. They are the exact qualities the present moment is calling for. The ancestral wisdom encoded in your lineage, preserved through generations of navigating pressure, maintaining clarity under opposition, and finding truth without institutional permission, is not a relic from the past. It is directly applicable right now. In a world where so many people are losing the thread of their own depth, what you carry without having to earn it from a classroom is more relevant than it has ever been. And your creativity, the transmission quality of it, the way it carries something from the unseen into the visible with a weight that manufactured content simply cannot match, stands apart in an environment drowning in generated output that gets consumed and forgotten within moments. What you translate from the real source does not just attract attention, it stays, it lands in people and lives there. It moves something that was stationary, it opens something that was sealed. Wouldn't was not simply have space for what you carry. The world is actively waiting for it, not with patience, but with urgency, the way a system under pressure waits for the element it cannot function without. Wouldn't was that. When you are fully arrived, you walk into any situation without spending a single unit of energy, managing how much of yourself you bring. All of it comes with you. The full pattern recognition runs quietly in the background, reading what is real beneath what is being performed, and it does so without apology. The full depth is available for any interaction that reaches somewhere true, and it is not rationed based on whether the other person looks ready to receive it. The full vision gets spoken clearly, even when the timeline it points to extends beyond what the people around you can currently see. When you are fully arrived, you are completely immune to the renaming game. When someone attempts to rename your clarity as arrogance, you do not defend yourself, and you do not step inside their framework to explain yourself. You see the move for exactly what it is, a structure protecting itself through a person who built their identity inside it, and you continue moving. Not with aggression, not with contempt, with the calm of someone who has identified the game and chosen not to play it. When you are fully arrived, you direct your gifts toward what they were actually meant to reach. You stop performing them for audiences who were never designed to receive them. You point your discernment, your depth, your creative transmission, and your long horizon vision at the work, the people, and the problems that were specifically sized for what you carry. When you are fully arrived, you carry the lineage with pride rather than with mystery. You understand that the gifts compressed into you through generations of sacrifice were not accidents. They were deliberate investments, capital stored in the safest vault available, which is you, so that when the conditions were finally right, the return on that investment could be realized at full value. And when you are fully arrived, you accept without residue that the discomfort your presence creates in certain dynamics is not evidence against your gifts, it is evidence of them. Your presence shook things before you had the full language for what you carry, before you understood the lineage, and before you saw through the opposition clearly. Consider what your presence does now. Tadjort, Tadjort. It is the only one that cannot be walked away from because it does not live outside you. It is the internalized version of everything that was ever said against you. Every time someone called you too much, if it happened often enough, from sources close enough, early enough, there was a chance it landed differently than ordinary external criticism. It did not necessarily land as something you consciously agreed with. It landed as a reflex. It became the hesitation before you speak the clearest thing you can see. It became the half second of "is this going to cost me?" that sometimes stretches into silence. It became the automatic pull toward making yourself smaller when a situation seems like it might not be built to hold you at full size. That is the internal constraint, not the external one. The world constructed, you have been escaping that one your entire life. The internal one was built from the materials the world handed you. You built it yourself, unconsciously, as a preemptive management system. A way of managing yourself before anyone else had to. That internal constraint is the last thing standing between where you are and where you are going. Addressing it does not require a dramatic confrontation. It does not require a manifesto or a public declaration. It requires one quiet, non-negotiable decision made in the private space where all actual decisions happen. Though you stop preemptively shrinking. Not because you have decided to be difficult, not because you have something to prove to anyone, but because you have done the full work of understanding, you have seen the structure for what it is, named the opposition accurately, understood the weight of the lineage you carry, and recognized the magnitude of the gifts and the urgency of the timing. You now know, with the same clarity that has always been your defining quality, that preemptive shrinking was the last thing that could not be taken from you by force. It was the thing you gave away voluntarily because it felt like the price of belonging. You are taking it back, not violently, decisively. Commenced of rot. One word you have second of mind was always built to play. Everything built from full expression compounds in ways that are not fully visible in the short term, but become undeniable across the long term. A trajectory, changed early enough, ripples forward in ways that neither you nor the person you reached can ever fully trace. Genuine transmission does not land and disappear, it lands and propagates. The frameworks you construct from long-horizon vision, the ones that the present context cannot yet fully receive, are not lost. They exist in the world, in the minds of people who encountered them, waiting for the moment when the timeline you could already see becomes visible to everyone else. And when that moment arrives, what you built will already be there, not as a monument to foresight, but as a functional tool in the hands of people who need it. The chain that the lineage paid so much to keep intact does not end with preservation. It extends with activation. The people who compressed their gifts into you were completing a relay. What gets built from the full activation of what was preserved, that is the next leg of the relay. That is the continuation they invested in. And the people whose dynamics were shaken by your presence, not all of them, but some of them, in private moments you will likely never witness, will have an experience where the discomfort turns into something else entirely. What was reflected back to them becomes what they reach for in themselves. The haunting becomes a catalyst. You will not know about most of those moments, and that is not the point. They happen. They are part of what full expression builds, even in the situations that pushed back the hardest. You are not building for immediate applause, you are building for the foundation that makes the next thing possible. And that is why your kind of mind, the kind that was never programmable, the kind that sees, the kind that translates, the kind that carries the fire forward from one generation to the next, does not just have value, it moves the needle that matters most. Not the needle of this season, the needle of the arc, one arc. You are that, not eventually, now one oath. The people who turned cold were not responding to your flaw, they were responding to your gift, the specific gift they could not contain, redirect or diminish by force. It was the clearest, most unmanageable, most threatening thing about you, the part that saw through exactly what needed to be seen through. The conditioned protected their framework, the performers protected their act, the resigned protected their grief. And underneath all three responses was the same unspoken acknowledgement. Something real had entered, something that could not be faked or manufactured into existence by any amount of effort or technique. Something that made the gaps in the performance visible, the cracks in the framework undeniable, the distance between what was being lived and what could be lived impossible to ignore. And you have been the diagnosis in every encounter since. That is not a burden. That is a function, the most honest function a mind can perform, to see clearly and to refuse to pretend otherwise. The rule you absorbed, don't see too much, don't say too much, don't be too much, was never a rule about who you actually are. It was a rule about who the structure needed you to pretend to be. Those are two entirely different things. And for a long time, the weight of social consequence made them feel like the same thing. It made the performance of smallness feel like the only reasonable option. It made the fire feel like something to manage rather than something to direct. But you were never actually small. You learned, under sufficient pressure, to perform smallness convincingly enough to temporarily reduce the friction. There is a difference between being something and performing it. Though, Now notice what never happened. The fire never went out. The pattern recognition never stopped running. The creative transmission never found a different channel. The vision never shortened itself to fit the expectations of the people around you. The gifts never actually left. They got quieter. They compressed, the way the lineage compressed before you, trusting that the person carrying them was stronger than the pressure being applied to them. That trust was not misplaced. You are still here. You are still carrying every gift that was placed in you through the blood and with purpose. You are still refusing to accept borrowed thinking as a substitute for truth. You are still unable to be fooled for long. You are still translating from a source that no structure can access or redirect. You are still seeing forward on a timeline that the people around you cannot yet read. The fire never went out. It was never going to go. So here is where you stand. Not at a beginning. You are too far into this to be at a beginning. Not at an ending. What you carry does not end. You stand at an activation point. This is the moment when the full weight of what has been named here, the lineage, the gifts, the opposition, the stakes, the timing, the size of what fully expressed actually looks like, becomes your operating framework, rather than something you only access in rare moments of clarity. You move from here as someone who knows, not someone who suspects, not someone who is confident on good days and doubtful on hard ones, someone who has traced the full arc and arrived at the only conclusion the evidence supports. Your gifts were placed in you with intention. The opposition was always proportional to the threat that the full version of you poses to every structure built on keeping minds small and manageable. The lineage preserved what it preserved through enormous cost because what you carry was worth that cost. The world is waiting for exactly what you are, and it is not waiting patiently. When you walk fully into any situation, when the full pattern recognition, the full depth, the full creative transmission, the full vision and the full authenticity all move together, the friction that follows is not something to avoid, manage or apologize for. That friction is the sound of something real, encountering something that was not built to hold it. Wodol, let it shake. Wodol bagua, wodol bagzak.